Everybody seems to be drafting the wrong players in fantasy football right now, which is crazy because the season's just 15 days away. You can't afford to be making these mistakes in your fantasy drafts, and hopefully you're not, but I want to let you know the 5 guys you should be drafting instead in this video so you can actually win your league. And for what it's worth, I've helped over 10,000 people win their league these last few years, so I want to help you do the same with this video. And I want to start in the 3rd round of drafts. That's what you're seeing on the screen right now. This is the average draft position. You can see Michael Pittman goes as the 35th overall player. Somehow he's currently going ahead of Cooper Kupp, who goes in the beginning of the 4th round, late 3rd round right now, and this makes no sense to me. As of right now, Pittman is drafted before Kupp in about 70% of fantasy drafts. But it's not just Michael Pittman. You can scroll up a little bit more. Nico Collins is selected before Cooper Kupp in over 80% of fantasy drafts. In all offseason, especially more recently, I've been telling you reasons as to why Nico Collins concerns me and as to why Cooper Kupp is looking like a better and better pick by the day. And look, I get it. There's been a lot of propaganda about the downfall of Cooper Kupp. You can see last year he let a lot of people down because he only played in 12 games. So he ended up missing 5 games. And out of those 12 games, if we scroll down on Player Profiler to his injuries last year, this was a guy who played all season hurt. You can see here in the preseason of 2023, hurts his hamstring. That's something that basically lingers for the next 2 months for him. And then, oh yeah, right when he's starting to get healthy, he picks up an ankle sprain, which is something that he dealt with last year. It's a reoccurring injury, and this affected him the rest of the season. This guy was never healthy last year, but despite that, still produced as a top 20 fantasy option in his games that he played. So maybe we should give Cooper Kupp a break instead of burying the guy as an older player, right? He battled through these injuries last year for you. He was actually out there producing as a top 20 player instead of sitting on the sidelines. And more specifically, when Kupp was out there for those games, he averaged 8.5 targets and 14.8 fantasy points. Again, top 20 usage and production. And I've mentioned it before this offseason, but the crazy part is Cooper Kupp, those numbers I just mentioned, the exact same amount of targets as Puka Nacua had per game in their games completed together last year, 8.5. And Puka Nacua, this man right here, only had 0.7 more fantasy points per game than Kupp in those contests. Not even a point more. So they were basically the same player, but Puka goes before Kupp by like a round or two now. And I get it, Kupp is an aging guy now into his 30s, but he's still playing on a good Rams team with a great head coach in Sean McVay who knows how to utilize his players, and Kupp is a slot receiver. That's usually a spot where you can succeed into older age. And by all camp reports right now, you're getting Cooper Kupp healthy entering the season. He looks great in camp, and he doesn't have the competition like guys like Nico Collins who go ahead of him too, and Stephon Diggs coming in, and Tank Dell who averaged more fantasy points per game and targets per game in his completed games with Nico Collins last year. We also mentioned that Michael Pittman is now going ahead of Kupp in drafts, which even a year or 2 or 3 years ago would have seemed crazy, and to me it's still crazy this year because Michael Pittman, he gets his quarterback in Anthony Richardson back, but Richardson's a mobile quarterback, and a team that's probably going to run the ball a good amount with Jonathan Taylor behind a top 5 offensive line. Number 1 receivers with a mobile quarterback usually see less red zone upside and less overall target volume because that mobile quarterback takes off and runs. Now, the one concern I do have is this right here. PFF's rankings of the offensive line, the Rams, they just have an average unit right now, which is really all you need to do to not have an absolutely terrible offensive line. If you're just an average unit, PFF has done some research on this, you're fine. But the problem is this unit right now with the Rams, and I'm going to pull it back up, they're already dealing with a couple of different injuries. One of probably their most important piece in Havenstein, their right tackle, a big position for any quarterback or offensive line, currently is dealing with an injury. 3 of their starters at this point in time are currently on the injury report and maybe have some up in the air status entering week 1. If 1, 2, obviously if all 3 of those guys are gone, this becomes a very sketchy offensive line, which affects the whole offense and Kupp. But if we could assume that we just get one of those guys back, and ideally all 3 back, they don't seem like catastrophic injuries, well then yeah, I really do want Cooper Kupp right here as he goes as the wide receiver 19, 38th off the board overall in round 4 currently. I want him over Michael Pittman. Jalen Waddle's where it starts to become a toss-up. I want him over Brandon Ayuk. I want him over Mike Evans. I want him over Nico Collins. I want him over all of these guys. He's a borderline top 15, if not slam dunk top 12 wide receiver and becoming a second-round pick for me in fantasy drafts right now. Start drafting. Now that takes us to our next situation, the running back position, where we're going to be looking in round 2 of drafts. I want to focus the attention on Devon Achane because right now in drafts he's going after guys like, and it's pretty crazy to me in my opinion, Kyren Williams right now. And that's the main one that I want to point to right now because this is a mistake. Kyren Williams should not be going before Devon Achane for many reasons that we're about to get into in drafts. Now I'm completely fine taking these other guys ahead of Devon Achane. You have Derrick Henry here. Yeah, I completely agree with that. You have all these guys like Jonathan Taylor up here, Saquon, completely agree with that. You can even give me a coin flip with Isaiah Pacheco, one of the best breakout candidates, I believe, entering this year. I'm fine with those. I'm not fine with Kyren Williams, and the reason why it's important is because Kyren's going before Achane in over 70% of drafts right now, so a lot of you are making this mistake, or people are, and I don't want you to. Look, I've been vocal at times this offseason about the cons of Devon Achane's profile, with them drafting another running back, with them re-signing Raheem Mostert. These things do not help the overall upside of Devon Achane, but we can't ignore the fact that this guy was absolutely lights out last year, averaging 6.6 yards per touch, set an NFL record averaging averaging 7.7 yards per touch. That's number one in the record books right now for qualified running backs with 100 or more touches. And this guy had 20 plus fantasy points in 56% of his completed games last season, including this week where he scored over 50 fantasy points, had over 200 yards. As you can see right here, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. And a lot of people will point to the fact like, oh, this 50-point week, this is what propelled him forward into having such a massive season. It was that one week where he scored 50 points. If you take that out, he stunk. Well, those people obviously didn't do the research. But lucky for us, Sonny over on Twitter, he did do the research. If you took out that game, De'Von Achane's 17-game pace would have still been 1,700 yards. That's just on the ground, 55 catches, another 400 receiving yards, and 23 touchdowns, right? Obviously, this is a season that's probably not going to sustain. He was highly efficient last year, and that's likely going to drop a little bit, but it just shows you that that one big performance wasn't why he had a big year. Even without that, he was going to have a historically efficient and productive season. Now, all of these things are the good aspects about De'Von Achane. Of course, there's a little bit of hesitancy right now. That's why Kyren Williams is going ahead of him in drafts, and let's break down some of that hesitancy or those cons. And the first one is that last year he only played in 11 games, which means he missed 6 games, but if you were to actually scroll down on Player Profiler here, he actually was on the injury report. If we pull it up over here, injury report weeks, 3 weeks with this injury, 7 weeks with that injury, another week with this injury, so 11 total weeks, which is 11 out of 17 weeks. That's over 60% of your games, and he dealt with so many injuries. You had the shoulder in the preseason, you had the knee 5 weeks in, you had the toe and the toe soreness and the bruised ribs towards the end of the season. All year long, to start the year, middle of the year, and end of the year, this guy was hurt, he was out, or he was playing through injury. And look, this was a concern when Achane entered the NFL. He's a smaller frame player at about 5'9", a little bit below the average for a running back, and definitely 188 pounds is below the NFL average that you would like to see around 205 to 210 pounds. So is this correlated, the smaller frame, to picking up more injuries? I would like to say yes, because you're going up against physical 260-pound linebackers and 320-plus pound defensive linemen. So that is a concern, but we've seen multiple reports out of camp that apparently Achane has added some muscle so far this offseason. Achane's added muscle should help his durability, and that's something that would be nice to see. I've already stated a couple times this offseason, how much can he really add in like a 4 to 5 month offseason? If you're dedicated to it, you could probably add 5 to 10 pounds of muscle, which is really all we need here for him to become a more durable back and somebody who can even be, let's just say, more explosive with that added muscle. But here's the thing, even if he doesn't earn a larger role and he sees the exact same role he saw last year, 43% of the snaps, as long as he just stays a little bit healthier, you're getting a guy who is probably in line to be a top 3 running back finishing the season if he just sees 40 to 45% of the snaps. Number 3 in broken tackle rate last year. Number 1 in explosive run rate of 10 plus yards and his percentage of his carries. We already showed you that he averaged 7.7 yards per touch. So if nothing changes about his role this year and he just stays healthy and plays those games and doesn't leave games early, yeah, he's going to be a top 5, if not top 3 fantasy running back. But imagine if something does change, because he's competing with a 32-year-old in Raheem Mostert, who eventually the wheels are going to fall off, or he'll deal with another injury like he has in the past a lot of times. And then after that, it is a 4th rounder in Jalen Wright, who's had a nice camp, a nice preseason. I think is a talented player, led college football in explosive run rate last year, but I don't think he's going to come in and see 50+% of the snaps. I think you're going to see around 50% of the snaps for Achane, 50% of the snaps for Mostert, sprinkled in a little bit here and there will be Jalen Wright. Something happens to Mostert, you're getting Achane for probably close to 60+% of the snaps, and that's where he starts to become the number 1 overall fantasy running back that you get to take in the late 2nd round of drafts. Now, I've been on record in the past, even on videos on this channel and some other social platforms, saying that in rounds 1 and rounds 2 of your drafts, as a tip, you want to draft for reliability, not upside. And I completely agree that me saying Achane at the end of the 2nd round is a worthwhile pick over a guy like Kyren Williams would be going against that. But I think he is the one exception because he is just that damn explosive for where he's going right now and has that much upside in this specific offense in Miami. So when I compare him to Kyren Williams, and look, there's nothing wrong with Kyren Williams. He was the number 2 overall running back last year. He has a little bit more competition this year, but like we talked about earlier with the Rams offensive line, that's giving me a little bit of pause for Kyren Williams here, and the fact that Blake Corum's now there. I just want De'Von Achane all day long over Kyren Williams right now in drafts, especially when they're both going at the end of the 2nd round. I think there's a lot of upside there. So we've hit on the wide receivers, we hit on the running backs. Now let's talk about a very important quarterback situation that people are getting wrong. But before we actually dive into that situation, which honestly, I can't believe 70+% of people are getting this decision wrong in drafts right now, I want to let you know about the Fantasy Blueprint. I see over 12,000 people, close to 15,000 people are currently using it. And if you want to use it this year, you want to win your league, as you can see right here, does this sound like you? You just click this button and it'll take you to a page where you can get the Fantasy Blueprint this season absolutely risk-free, as you can see right here, through one of our 2 partners. Now, what does that mean? Well, you'll see the link in the description below. It'll take you to this page and give you the steps on how to get the Blueprint risk-free, which means if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I just refund the $10 payment. It's a one-time $10 payment if you sign up through one of our partners. If you don't make your playoffs, like I said, it's risk-free. You get it absolutely right back. And like I said, nearly 15,000 people have used and are currently using the Fantasy Blueprint right now, which means maybe your league mates are, so You should probably get it just to keep up with them, but it's going to help you get to your playoffs, win your league. Scan the QR code on the screen to get that blueprint right now, or click the link in the description below. There's the plug. We paid the bills. Let's get back to the video. Now, that very interesting quarterback situation I want to talk about is right here. You can see the top 5 quarterbacks are Patrick Mahomes. Well, number 1 is Allen, Mahomes 2, Hurts, Lamar Jackson. Okay, whatever order you want those guys. But CJ Stroud going number 5 over Anthony Richardson, and this is happening in nearly 70% of drafts right now, is just absolutely insane to me. And don't take this as CJ Stroud slander. I know the guy was great last year. I watched football. I watched his tape from last year. I think everything is great there, but we're talking about fantasy football where he lacks upside compared to a guy like Anthony Richardson. I'll even give you some Stroud stats to show you how good he was last year. He finished 7th in fantasy points per game while ranking 4th in quarterback efficiency and 5th in deep ball accuracy. The guy was absolutely lights out as a passer last year, and look, it's probably only going to get better as time goes on, but here's the concern for fantasy. We're not concerned with real life, already one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but for fantasy football, this is the issue right here. He only averaged 11.1 rushing yards per game. He wasn't much of a mobile rusher in college. It didn't translate to the NFL. That was 31st amongst all quarterbacks. Here's the thing. Mobility is what leads to upside. A guy like Tua last year led the NFL in passing yards. He was top 5 in passing touchdowns. Didn't even finish as a top 15 quarterback because he had no mobility. That's the type of downside we're talking about with Stroud. So Stroud needs to finish in like the top 3 in passing touchdowns to pay off his price tag, in my opinion, whereas Anthony Richardson doesn't need to do that because he has the elite mobile upside to finish and probably will finish if he stays healthy as a top 5 quarterback. Last season, this guy started and completed 2 games. Week 1, he did, and he had, what do you know, 21.9 fantasy points, number 4 overall in fantasy. Week 3, he started and completed, he had 29.6 fantasy points, number 2 overall in fantasy. Why? Because he scored a rushing touchdown each week. He had 40 rushing yards. He had 56 rushing yards. He also has a big arm as well. Even in this game right here, he only finished 19th because he only played 1 quarter. In that 1 quarter, he had 35 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. The dude was averaging over a touchdown and a half per game on the ground alone last year, not even to factor in his rushing yards, averaging nearly 13 fantasy points per game as a rusher. That's not even factoring his arm. And oh yeah, it looks like his offensive line, according to PFF, number 3 in the NFL entering this year. It looks like they're going to return to form after we got a better season out of Quentin Nelson last year. We got a couple other people stepping up in big ways, like a veteran in Ryan Kelly last year put together, as you can see right here, one of the best seasons of his career, and he should be backing it up once again this year. So you're getting a guy coming back healthy in Anthony Richardson, who, look, I get it. People are concerned with the shoulder surgery, but we'll talk about that in a second. It seems like his role will stay the same, and he's going to get to go behind one of the best offensive lines in football. Now, here's what I was talking about with his own head coach, Shane Steichen, the play caller for this offense. Somebody asked, hey, are you going to limit Anthony Richardson this year? Last year, he had the shoulder surgery. He had a concussion as well that knocked him out of a game. And he said, Shane Steichen, are you going to limit Steph Curry from shooting 3-pointers, right? He's just saying that that is part of Anthony Richardson's strengths, the run game. And obviously it is. That's why they drafted him as a top 5 overall pick last year to be their franchise quarterback, because this dude is built like LeBron James. He's an extreme athlete at the quarterback position, and he wins with his legs. And if anybody is worried about Anthony Richardson, my friend Deepak over on Twitter, make sure to follow him, Sports MD Analysis. He says, Anthony Richardson, limited data suggests accuracy won't dip if sliding, not higher injury risk. So if sliding, right? So if sliding is a big one there. Obviously, if you're taking a lot more hits on that shoulder, there could be a concern of a re-injury risk. So I think that's something that they're going to address. But overall, the limited data means that he's fine going into this year. There's not like an overall elevated risk for him compared to a normal mobile rusher that you just have to slide, right? You just can't take on those big hits. I think that's what they're going to tell him. I mean, just look at these stats last year. This dude, I mean, he left 2 games early and he was still top 5 in rushing yards per game. Probably going to be top 2 up there with Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, if he actually finishes the season. And he ranked 7th in quarterback rushing touchdowns from playing just 2 completed games and then leaving 2 games early. This guy last year played 10 quarters of football and already ranked 7th, I had 8, 7th in rushing touchdowns for quarterbacks. This guy is going to have potentially 12 plus rushing touchdowns this year if he stays healthy, if not more. And I'm willing to bet on Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator, or the head coach, I should say, and the play caller in this offense, who's somebody who has just been lights out every single step of his career. I mean, you could look back to the days when he was with Justin Herbert in 2020. Then Jalen Hurts, 2 years ago, he had to the breakout season of Jalen Hurts. I think now we're going to get it with Anthony Richardson. So maybe this isn't even a decision for you. Maybe you get Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts ideally in round 3. That'd be perfect. But if you're in this spot of drafts where you're debating on getting your quarterback right around the 50th overall pick, make sure you're taking Anthony Richardson and his upside over CJ Stroud. I mean, if you really wanted CJ Stroud, you might as well wait. I don't know, he's going 50th overall. You can literally wait till Trevor Lawrence, who I think is a very similar quarterback with more rushing upside, and he goes 122nd overall, literally 70 picks later, 6-7 rounds later, and you get a very similar quarterback who has good weapons and is going to pass a lot and has more mobility than Stroud. The next man up I want to talk about is Zamir White. White, who all off season long has been a fantasy football breakout candidate for myself and a lot of other people. He's getting a lot of hype, and for good reason. I mean, this is a guy who's going to have a larger role with Josh Jacobs gone from the Raiders in what is going to be a run-first offense under head coach Antonio Pierce. Almost lost the fella's name there, but we got it, fellas. We got it. But the problem right now for Zamir White is he's already getting bumped up to going 67th overall. He's going as a 6th round pick. I liked this guy when he was a value in the 7th or 8th rounds, but now the value's kind of soaked out, especially since he's going ahead of Najee Harris. He's going 2 picks ahead of Najee Harris. He gets drafted about 60% of the time more than Najee Harris right now. And here's the deal. You might not like Najee Harris, but this is way too early for Zamir White, and I'm going to tell you why you should be drafting Najee instead. When we look at the profiles of these guys, they're both going to be in a run-first offense. You have Zamir White with the Raiders, Najee with the Steelers, but there's a couple of big differences here. The first one is that the Steelers have a much better offensive line. PFF has them as a top 10 unit entering this year when the Raiders have arguably and probably do have a bottom 10 offensive line. So we're getting a better offensive line, and we're also getting, in my opinion, a better play caller for Najee Harris. Say what you want about Arthur Smith, but he's one of the most respected play callers in the league from other coaches when he's an offensive coordinator, not a head coach like the last 2 years. This guy has led through 4 straight seasons. That's 4 straight seasons of top 10 rushing offenses, 2 with the Titans and then the last 2 with the Raiders. It's going to continue this year with the Steelers, who already ran the ball a lot last year, now have a good offensive line, even improved their offensive line. It sets up nicely for Najee. And for what it's worth, I also think the quarterback situation, although not great, I think it's one of the worst in the league. It's not as bad as what the Raiders are dealing with Gardner Minshew and one Aiden O'Connell. You get Russell Wilson, who I believe will start week 1, although Justin Fields is making a case for it. Again, I don't think this quarterback situation is that much better than the Raiders, but it's just another little aspect as to why I think Najee Harris' situation is better. All around, I think it's better, and we have experience, years of experience of Najee as a starter. We know what to expect here for a player who last year had a nice season. This was a guy who was very quietly, as a 230-pound back, he entered last year a little bit smaller, like 225 pounds. It was a big thing that he was losing some weight. Very quietly last year was extremely explosive. He was top 10 in breakaway run rate. That is his percentage of runs that went for 10 or more yards. He was very efficient in terms of his yards per touch being about 4.5. And now you're getting a guy who's already shown in the past that he can handle a 300 carry workload. And I think Arthur Smith's going to want to give the big 225-pound, 230-pound back in Najee Harris a lot of carries, just like he loved to give Tyler Algier the last 2 years a good amount of usage, even when he didn't deserve it. And Najee specifically does deserve it. And for what it's worth, Najee's entering a contract year. The Steelers didn't pick up his 5th-year option, so there should be added motivation there. So when you're getting Najee Harris last year, being top 10 in explosive run rate, putting up 1,200 yards, it's just a guy that I cannot pass up on, especially considering Zamir White, a guy that we liked when he was a 7th or 8th round pick, just really hasn't proved it yet, and he doesn't have as good of an offensive line, a good offensive in general, and he's not locked into a passing down role. Neither is Najee Harris, but we know Najee can at least catch from his college and early career if it came to it. If something happened to Jaylen Warren, can catch 50-plus balls. Now, before we keep going here, I just want to let you know that over 65% of you are not subscribed to this channel. More people are seeing this channel. It's growing faster than it ever has. I appreciate you all a ton, but I want to give you that little urge here to hit the subscribe button. I get it. You might just forget to do it or so. That's completely fine. I forget a lot of the times as well, but here's that little urge to hit the subscribe button. My goal is to get that close to 50% by week 1 of the NFL season. It really helps this channel a ton when you hit the subscribe button. All right, enough of that. Hit subscribe. Let's get back to it. And now I want to talk about the tight end position. The number 1 overall tight end. He goes as a late 2nd, early 3rd round pick is Sam Laporta right now. Look, majority of the times he's the number 1 tight end off the board, ahead of Kelsey and all these guys. I get that. But if you're telling me right here, I can get Mark Andrews 23 picks later, 2 rounds later than Sam Laporta, why in the world is anybody drafting Sam Laporta as a 2nd or 3rd round pick when you literally get Mark Andrews right now as an early 5th round pick? Give me Mark Andrews that value over Laporta every single day. And look, I get it. People like Sam Laporta, the upside as a rookie last year. If him and Andrews were going in a similar range, I'd probably take Laporta, but even then, it's close. It's that close. And stick with me here because I've thought through this a little bit. Last season, Mark Andrews, he was injured, but he played in 10 completed games, and he averaged 14.6 fantasy points per game. And we can compare this to Sam Laporta, who averaged 14.1 fantasy points per game, despite scoring 4 more touchdowns than Andrews. So Andrews, who is still just 28 years old as of this recording, was still good last year. People are kind of writing him off. And if you just want to look back at the track record here, this is a guy with the last 3 seasons, tight end 1, tight end 3, tight end 5, which last year this is factoring in 1.5 or 2 games where he left early. So really, he was probably around a top 4, top 3 tight end once again. And I get it. Sam Laporta was a rookie last year. He was taken well later than Mark Andrews. Andrews should have outscored him and outproduced him last year, which he did. But entering this year, why has anything really changed? Because Laporta is going 20 picks ahead of Mark Andrews right now, but I don't know how Laporta is going to have a bigger season than he did last year. I mean, he had 120 targets in an offense that still has Amon-Ra St. Brown, still has Jahmyr Gibbs in the passing game, is going to want to run the ball a lot, and Laporta led all tight ends last year with 10 touchdowns. This 11.5% TD rate is going to come down. It more than likely is going to come down. So if Laporta goes to catching now 6 or 7 touchdowns, similar targets, I mean, he's automatically dropping much further than what Andrews produced last year on just just better volume. Because when Andrews was actually out there and healthy last year, Mark Andrews was the guy who was averaging 35% more points than anybody else on this team, including the rookie Zay Flowers last year. As of right now, yeah, Zay Flowers is there. Bateman is there as a late round option. They have the running back in Derrick Henry, the newly signed running back. They'll probably feed him at least 15 carries a game on average. But as of right now, the number one option in this passing attack remains Mark Andrews, the number one option in the red zone for a guy who's seen a 40% red zone target share, leading all players during the last 3 to 4 years with Lamar Jackson. And if Andrews is actually healthy this year and plays more games, there's no reason he can't score 9 or 10 touchdowns. So again, I think these guys are very neck and neck, Sam Laporta and Andrews, but for some reason, Laporta goes 2 rounds earlier. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, realistically right now, you can get Sam Laporta with the 26th overall pick, or you could take Andrews like we said, or you could wait till the 71st overall pick and get a guy in Evan Ingram who led all tight ends in receptions and targets last year amongst the tight end position, and now Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones are gone. Evan Ingram's role should stay high as well. I just don't know why you're burning an early pick on a very similar tight end in Laporta when you get these guys later on. I feel like I'm definitely going to upset some people with that one, and I might upset some people with this one as we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens. Let's stick with Zay Flowers here, who as of right now, surprisingly to me, goes ahead of one Amari Cooper in more than 50% of fantasy drafts right now. And I get it. The rookie Zay Flowers was nice last year. He had 77 catches. He put up 858 yards. I mean, he might set the Ravens receiving record with over 1,200 yards this year. And even if he was to do that, I would still prefer Amari Cooper, because I honestly don't even think that Zay Flowers, if we can see him right here, I don't even think he's a top 3 option in this Ravens offense. And if you're going to go in like the 4th or 5th rounds of drafts and be the 4th option in your team's offense, that's pretty bad, right? Because Derrick Henry, I would say, is definitely a priority in the offense over him. We just made a big case for Mark Andrews. I definitely believe that Andrews is a priority in this offense over him. Then you might be able to argue that it's going to be Zay Flowers number 3, but I would argue that it's going to be Lamar Jackson's legs, whether that's just design runs or scrambles, as a bigger priority in the offense in terms of play calling than Zay Flowers. So that's not great for Flowers, the 4th option, maybe 3rd option in his offense. That's definitely not the case for Amari Cooper, though, because no doubt about it, Amari Cooper's the number 1 option in his offense. We know Amari is the number 1 receiver. We don't even know who the 2, 3, and 4 are. As of right now, it looks like Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, but apparently Cedric Tillman is making a case for this. David Njoku's a fine player, but he's not the blue chip type player that Amari Cooper is. And Nick Chubb, as of right now, is injured, so we know he's not going to be the leader in the way that the offense goes. It's going to be through Amari Cooper like it was last year. In fact, there's just been tons of reports already in camp that the Browns are going to throw a lot more this year. We've seen Kevin Stefanski. You could see this report right here on Twitter. Kevin Stefanski said an increase in tempo is possible for the Browns this year. And then Amari Cooper said recently in camp, new offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey wants to run as many plays as possible. But not only run as many plays as possible, they're looking to use more 3 wide receiver sets with that Chubb injury. They're looking to get into more of a pass-happy approach like they did the second half of last year. And Amari benefited in that type of an offense. So much so that he set a career high. He set a career high with over 1,200 receiving yards. He had 72 receptions. He was absolutely going bonkers out there with multiple different quarterbacks, putting up 128 targets per game. And by the way, this 128 targets per game has a lot of room to go up. If they do indeed pass a lot more this year, you might see Amari Cooper push 150 targets. And if that's the case, he's going to blow out of the water his career high from last year and in 1,250 receiving yards and have like 1,300 to 1,400 this year. And this is a guy who is just clockwork, Amari Cooper. I mean, you can go back as far as you want here. You can see a top 20 receiver, a top 15, top 20, top 25 is like his worst season ever. Okay, top 20 the last 2 years with this Browns team. That's while going through tons of different offensive coordinators, multiple different teams, so many different quarterbacks, and now maybe he'll finally have a little bit of stability in quarterback with Deshaun Watson returning. And all we need for Watson, who has this shoulder injury that he's dealing with apparently right now in camp, it's fine. All we need is for Watson not to be a top 10 quarterback, not even to be a top 15 quarterback. Just be a top 20 quarterback. Just don't be one of the stone worst quarterbacks in the NFL, and Amari Cooper should be able to succeed to pretty decent, if not great heights, and definitely pay off a 5th or a 6th round pick where he's going right now somehow after Zay Flowers. I just think that Amari Cooper has a longer track record of success and just a better offensive outlook this year for opportunities. Zay Flowers last year just wasn't used downfield at all. I mean, look at this right here. His average target distance, according to Player Profiler, 8.4 yards downfield. That was 81st in the NFL. Now we can see this change. He was used on the outside in college at Boston College, heading into year 2 in this offense, and Tom Monken offense with the Ravens. Maybe they put him more on the outside and use him downfield, but it's yet to be seen. Like, that would be hoping that something happens where we don't have to hope for that for Amari Cooper. So right now in the 5th to 6th rounds of drafts, you can see Amari Cooper goes as a 53rd overall player. I just much prefer him to Zay Flowers, who in about 53 to 55% of drafts right now is going before Amari Cooper, depending on the platform that you're looking at. I think Amari 75% of the time should be going ahead of Zay Flowers. Obviously, if you're only drafting one time, 100% of drafts going ahead of Zay Flowers. So these are the guys that you should actually be drafting this year, not the other guys that are going ahead of them right now in drafts. But if you want to see the overall 10 best picks, I can't put both hands up, 10 best picks in fantasy drafts right now, well, check out this lovely video right here. These are the 10 best picks that if you can get as many of them as possible, you're probably going to end up going to the playoffs, your championship, and winning your league. So check out that video right now, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one.